It was pretty amazing, actually. So, weird, you know. I mean, the streets were thronged with people, and James Brown's playing Living in America, and various other James Brown hits. So, let's talk a little bit. Hope you guys had a good weekend. Yeah? Nobody got arrested? Okay, good. Remember that we have to quarantine for another 2 weeks because we had a positive last week. So that means this class has to wear masks. Do you have a mask? Okay. This class has to wear a mask. I have some down here if you need them. So put them over your nose and mouth. Thank you. Nobody got arrested? Yeah?
Not that I remember.
Good job. Okay, not that you remember. Well, you'll find out, right? Who all with? Who with? Big numbers, all right. My husband got so excited with the tying touchdown that he squeezed me so hard that he popped all my vertebrae and may have cracked a rib, right? So, I said it's worth it. It's totally worth it. Right? Okay. We're going to talk about elections and campaigns today. We're going to talk primarily about just the financing, the strategy, that sort of stuff. And then on Wednesday, we're going to look at some ads and the advertising itself, which I think you guys will really enjoy. All right? So this is more meat and potato stuff, right? You'll get a little bit more dessert on Wednesday, all right? Okay, so here we go. Democrats award delegates proportionately, all right? Almost entirely, if you look, these are the dark purple, how many delegates are awarded proportionally in primaries, and then the light purple is how many are awarded proportionally from caucuses, okay? A primary is different from a caucus. What's the difference between a primary and a caucus? Say it again. Okay, yeah, so a caucus is open and a primary is private. So with a caucus, we might be meeting here in our precinct, right? And we will be debating over who our precinct ought to vote for, okay? And so there's some room in caucuses if you have some really passionate ground game, right? You see this, Obama in 2008 is super effective using this. And so, a really passionate ground game can make a difference in a caucus. But also the problem with caucuses would be that what? They take a long time, which means lower turnout, okay? Fewer people are going to show up to vote and participate in a caucus because it's open, it takes a long time, and you might have people show up at the beginning and their candidate's out, so they just leave, that happens too. But they can go on for, 6, 7, 8 hours, right? Especially if you have a big field, okay? So caucuses are much more participatory, but fewer people participate, whereas primaries use the Australian ballot, which means that they are private. You go in, you say, I am registered with this party, or in Oklahoma, for example, if you're going to vote in the Democratic primary, you can either be a Democrat or an independent, either one, okay? If you're a Republican, you have to be a Republican. Parties set up primary rules state by state. States do not set them up. The parties within that state set up primary caucus rules, okay? So that's significant. But Democrats are going to award delegates proportionally, which means if you win 70 to 30, you still don't get all of them, right? You get 70% of them. And so it's harder to kind of pull away, but it does end up with a candidate who has gotten the majority of the vote the majority of the time. It just takes longer. They campaign in every state. That's a great thing about a primary or a caucus. It requires those presidential candidates to campaign in every state because after the primaries and caucuses, they don't. Okay, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then the allocation rules vary by state. What does it mean by proportional? right? Do you get some extra if you win, right? What's the threshold? If you get only 10%, do you still get a delegate, or do you lose that? Do you have to get 20%? Those sort of things vary by state. In 2008, more delegates went to eventually President Obama, at the time Senator Obama, even though at the time Senator Clinton had more votes, okay? And this is because they had a caucus primary hybrid. So 99 to 94 is how much it ends up going, right? Okay, but proportionally, in the primaries, which they had both, right? President Obama gets 50 to Clinton's 143. Okay? The final tally in 2008, 1766 Obama to 1639 Clinton. Did those votes in Texas make a difference? The way Texas had it set up, do these rules, these arcane rules matter? Yes, right? They matter. And so President Obama had a great ground game in Texas. He was prepared for that. It was like a weird thing that Texas was just doing that year. The Clinton campaign was not prepared for it. They did not have people on the ground for caucuses. Superdelegates are elected officials and party leaders to prevent undermining of party principles, and they also give the illusion of greater unity. There's a lot of pushback about superdelegates, but understand what their purpose is. The purpose of a superdelegate, of superdelegates generally, is to keep a party from being hijacked by someone who is not ideologically in line with the party. Okay? It's the purpose, right? And it used to be up until the McGovern-Fraser Commission, until that point, it was essentially all superdelegates. It's not like at that point it changes and it becomes primarily, right, this. And so at the end of this, the final tally is 1766 to 1639. That's close. You throw in the weirdness of Texas, it's even closer. But these superdelegates make it 2230 to 1897. There's a little more room there. It looks like there's more party unity. More people are able to get behind the candidate. In 2016, Democratic delegates, Clinton kind of is ahead of Sanders much more than Obama was ahead of Clinton. I wanted that to be really clear. There was a lot of pushback at that time saying, he was kept out by the superdelegates. That's just not true. She won by 400 votes in terms of delegates, proportional votes. And then the superdelegates just make it bigger, right? They just make it a bigger margin, but there's no question. In 2020, Biden and Sanders, Biden just wins that one, right? There's just the final tally, 2,700 to 1,119, all right? So these rules make a difference. This is the Democratic primaries and caucuses. Now, the Republican Party, which makes its own rules in each state, is different. They award delegates at conventions via proportional vote, a hybrid of that, and then also winner take all. They do it all, okay? And it depends on the state. And so if you look at this, the dark green are winner take all. Florida, which has a massive, and Iowa, which is the first state, right? But Florida, which has a massive population, is winner take all. So that means if you get 40% of the vote, and the next two get 30 and 20 and 10, with 40% of the vote, you get all of the Florida delegates. That's significant, okay? At the same time, you have these hybrids, where, the hybrids are the striped ones, and it's proportional, but half of the delegates go winner take all. So half of the delegates are winner take all, the other half are proportional, and so that shrinks also that amount that you get, or it amplifies the amount that you get if you get that 40%. Okay, it really does amplify it. Then we have the proportional, those are the pale green. And if you look, those gray ones are convention only. You have to go to a state party convention. You have to go to a state party convention and win that state party convention to even have a role. So people do not have a vote that are not active party members who get into the state conventions. Okay? The allocation rules change from one election cycle to another. This is how it is in what was in 2016. It was really similar in 2020. Okay? But they do change a little bit. So the final tally in 2008, Romney versus others, right? 1,500 to 500. Kind of this overwhelming victory there for Romney. But if we look at 2016, Trump's final tally, and remember all of these winner-take-all rules and conventions, 2472 to 2428. It's much, much closer, and he is helped by the fact that there are no superdelegates, and by the fact that it's winner-take-all. So that means you get 38%, everybody else gets less, you get them all. Yeah?
I might be confused, but didn't Romney run in 2012?
Sorry, it should be 2012.
Oh,
you're right.
I just wanted to, yeah.
Sorry, it should be 2012, you're right. McCain was 2008, I apologize. Sometimes, you guys, I do have brain. In 2020, Trump wins much more decisively. Right? He's really the only candidate that's running, gets a delegate. We also have things that are issues with the Electoral College. The Electoral College. It can produce a minority vote, right, in 2000 and also in 2016. In both of those cases, Gore wins and Clinton wins, right? But they do not win the Electoral College. That means you have a minority vote president, a president who does not have the majority of the people in the United States behind him to start, right? Okay? And this is really going to weaken the president's ability to get things done. Okay? It accentuates the big sword. Remember the big sword, right? It pushes that out there. It makes it really clear. But also it distorts political campaigns. And this is, I'm just showing you right here, where people are campaigning when Romney is campaigning versus where Obama is campaigning. Okay? So the blue are all the Obama election rallies and offices. Okay? The red are Romney. What do you notice? Once the primary is over, what happens? What? They focus on swing states only. They don't come back to your state unless it is a $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 plate rally where they see, 100, 500 people and they collect some money. They're not going to show back up otherwise. And it does not matter if you're going to vote for them or not. They're just not going to show up. Okay? And so that means that ultimately, when we're talking about getting to know a candidate, if you live in Florida, right? Wisconsin, Iowa, Ohio, right? Virginia, a little bit North Carolina, Colorado, and Nevada in 2012. And these change, right? But they haven't expanded that much, right? People are showing up in Georgia now, okay? And in Arizona. But the thing is if you're not a swing state, then they don't bother. That means they don't buy ad time. There's some national ads that you may see. There are some things on social media you might see because of algorithms, but they don't show up locally, and you don't get to know those candidates. The next national election is 2022. This is 2021, which means it's when? Next year, all right. So it's only going to be for about a third of the Senate, right? We'll talk about that later, and every single House seat. Listen to what I'm saying here. Congress matters. They are the representatives that are closest to you, particularly the House of Representatives. The reason why they have the power to initiate tax bills, which we'll talk about later, is because they are most directly responsible to us. They have to be reelected every 2 years. If you don't show up for congressional elections, then you're not showing up for the elections where your vote matters most. Okay? Do you understand what I'm saying? Midterm elections actually, especially if you're in the state of Oklahoma, matter a whole lot more than do presidential elections. And that's true for most states. Okay? That's true for most states. So, congressional elections are the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November every even-numbered year. Every fourth year, there's also a presidential election. Midterm congressional elections are different from presidential election years because there's less media attention because it's harder, right? It's harder to give that kind of media attention to that many people. And so they don't. The truth is the media, sorry Eric, is a little lazy. Okay? They're a little lazy about things that are hard to explain. They're a little lazy about talking about nuances whenever it comes to elections. They want show and they want ratings.
Because that's what people want.
And Eric would contend that that's what people want. But I will tell you that I do not watch reality TV.
PBS NewsHour.
So, yeah, if you want to watch PBS, I'll allow it. All right, so less media attention, lower voter turnout. There are a couple of exceptions. There's some big kind of surge years, all right? But 2018 still has less than 2020, okay? They're even more ideologically skewed, right? Which means this, and this is important, those primaries for members of Congress. You have an opportunity to vote for someone who is more ideologically similar to you, right? Whether that be more progressive or more centrist, whether that be more conservative or more moderate. You have an opportunity, but you're not going to show up. You don't show up in the primaries. You don't show up at the election. People don't show up unless they are partisans and they are more ideologically skewed than the general public. Independents in particular are the ones who kind of fall out here. And that's 30% of us. So think about that. The president's party almost always loses seats. This is a rule, okay? This is a political science rule. There are two political science rules whenever it comes to elections. The first one is this. You can look at the economy in the May of a presidential election year, and if it's doing well, the president will win. If it's an incumbent running again, it can't be their same party. It doesn't work that way. And if it's doing poorly, they'll lose. What was happening in May of 2020? How was the economy?
Bad.
It was bad, you guys. It was bad. Right? Did Donald Trump lose? Yeah, he did. And Joe Biden got more than 50%, which in a presidential year lately, that's a big deal. Okay. The other rule for elections is this. In midterms, with the exception of 2 times, and I'll talk about them in just a second, the president's party loses seat. Should you expect for Democrats to lose seats in the midterms in 2022? Yes, you should. That's what should happen. Now, does that necessarily happen? No. Okay? And let me give you 2 examples where it did not. In 1998, Bill Clinton is president of the United States. None of you are alive. Well, 3 of you are alive. Okay? What was going on, the 3 of you who are alive? In 1998, what was going on with Bill Clinton? Monica Lewinsky impeachment scandal. The media said, impeach Bill Clinton. The people went, like, so he cheated on his wife, man? I don't get it.
He's married to Hillary.
Right? Newt Gingrich said, impeach him. They said, dude, you cheated on your wife while your other wife was dying in the hospital of cancer. Maybe you should shut up. Right? And so, Bill Clinton in 1998 is caught red-handed. Well, you know. And he goes before the people, and he says, I'm sorry. I did have relations with Miss Lewinsky. It is my shame. And I apologize, mostly to my wife, but to the American people for lying. I was trying to protect my family. And America went, yeah! I mean, seriously, like his ratings went through the roof. He went out of office as the most popular president to go out of office since Eisenhower. People were like, we get it, man, it happens. Seriously. So in 98, he did not lose seats. The other time was actually just 4 years later. In 2000, right? Al Gore wins the popular vote. But George W. Bush wins the Electoral College and becomes president. Okay? George W. Bush was not doing well in the ratings. He, by the end of August of 2001, had been on vacation more than he had been in the Oval Office. People were not impressed. You know, he didn't win the popular vote, and people just didn't really like what he was doing anyway. And then what happened? 9/11 happened. And he went to ground zero, and I'll talk about this, I'll give you exactly, I'll tell you this again, one more time, right? But he went to the site of the World Trade Center, and he got a megaphone, and he said, we're gonna kick their ass! And everyone went, yeah! And his ratings went through the roof. Right? And so, in 2002, we see a correction in alignment with that rally around the flag. Everybody loved Congress, everybody loved the president, they liked what they were doing. That's typical when a war starts after it becomes close. And so the Republican Party gained seats in Congress in 2002. That's the only 2 times it's happened in history. Okay? So, campaigns. Campaigns are really highly structured. Okay? They're structured like a business. They try to get the most gain out of limited resources. Okay? So presidential candidates don't show up in Oklahoma because
It's not a swing vote.
costs money. What's the point? Presidential candidates don't go to Utah. Why not? It's a waste of money. Presidential candidates sometimes go to California for the money, but for the most part, do they go to California? No, what's the point? Right? They're going to go to swing states, they're going to maximize returns. At the lower level, they're going to rely really heavily on volunteers. If you want to get involved in politics and you don't know how, find a local person running for office within the next year and go volunteer. And if you're there at the beginning, enough people will fall off that eventually you'll probably get paid. I mean, it's true, right? It's a hard business and it's difficult. But if you're really interested, start as a volunteer. And you get the experience, but also you've been there long enough, you get promoted. we rely really heavily on volunteers for this. As we go up the chain, more paid staff, but that reliance on volunteers never disappears. So the point is that if there's somebody you want to support and you have 2 hours a week to give, go give 2 hours a week. They'll happily take your time and you'll learn a lot. Okay? It's structured like a business, but it's treated like a sport. Okay? The object is to win. In other words, trick plays are fair plays. Okay? The object is to win. It's treated like a sport. That means it often gets very nasty, which we will also talk about. That means that there are absolutely dirty tricks. Some of them are illegal and some of them are not. But people often take chances with illegal ones because they usually don't get caught. So there's a lot of Deflategate going on, which we named after Watergate because that was dirty tricks. But there was such a high level of money and slush going through that as you followed the money, you saw the level at which the campaign was corrupt. So the candidate's up there at the top, and basically the candidate is in charge of the campaign manager, the general consultant, and the legal team. But that also means that the campaign manager, the general consultant, the legal team have the most time with the candidate and also influence the candidate. Okay? The campaign manager is going to be in charge across here, the political director, the field director, the finance director, the comms director. The general consultant is going to be in charge of, getting the media consultants and the polling vendor and the direct mail vendor and the phone vendor and the data providers and the digital consultant. Because here's the thing. Every time you use your credit card, they sell that money, they sell that information, and they track it to see how best to appeal to you to get you to vote for them. Big data covers everything. So, who is most likely to be persuaded to change their vote? What do you guys think? Who's most likely to be persuaded to change their vote? People unhappy with their party. Okay, so you have some disgruntled people. All right, who else?
Young people.
Young people, because their opinions are still kind of, getting there. Huh?
Independent.
Independence, absolutely. Okay. Nature of the times voters. Okay. A lot of times people can be swayed by big events. Okay. Ideologues, staunch partisans are not going to change their vote. Okay. Where's the most efficient use of television advertising? Well, if, for example, you're running a senatorial campaign in Oklahoma, where do you buy your media shares? Local news station. Absolutely. It costs less money, number one. And number two, you don't need national anything. And you play during the news because it's a time when most people are going to be watching. Or the Super Bowl, always a good time. Right? Key sporting events, the Olympics. Right? There was a really good ad by Hillary Clinton in 2016 during the Olympics. Right? It was a smart ad buy. But if you're running locally in the Tulsa area, do you buy anything in the Oklahoma City local? No. You buy Tulsa. If you're running in Oklahoma City or, in western Oklahoma, where are you going to buy? If you're down in the Southwest, right, you're going to buy in Lawton and in Wichita Falls, Texas, because it's going to cover both. Okay? And same thing if you're running in that part of Texas. Okay? So, issue focus. If the economic conditions favor the candidate, Focus on the economy. Okay? So, for example, in 1992, when Bill Clinton is running for president, George H.W. Bush is incredibly popular just a year before. Okay? Everybody feels like the Iraq War, the first one, Gulf War I, right, had gone swimmingly. Right? We got in there, we kicked some butt, we got out. People were happy, right? But the economy was kind of meh. Okay? And he did some things. Like he went to a grocery store. You guys know what happened in the grocery store? Well, George H.W. Bush had not been to a grocery store in at least 12 years. Probably longer. Okay? And so, whenever they had these little machines that scanned items, he was like, what is this magic? And people were like, who is this guy? Right? He knows nothing about us. He knows nothing about our life. And so how could he understand that the economic conditions are crap? And so the Clinton campaign had a slogan. It's the economy, stupid. Bring it back every time. And they did, repeatedly, and it was successful. We also have things like party ownership of issues. There are some issues that one party owns and the other party doesn't, right? Focus on those, especially if it's in the news, especially if you get some concern, right? Especially if there's something big that's happened. And then there's get out the vote. You can try to change people's minds, but the most important thing you can do is get the people you know will vote for you to show up. Right? So you knock doors, you make phone calls, you give them rides to the polls, use social media to target. And while potential voters are certainly the holy grail, there just aren't that many, right? This is something that's different about the 2020 election, right? We had a whole bunch of unlikely voters show up. We had the highest turnout in 2020 that we've had proportionally of the voting eligible public since 1900. Who could vote in 1900? Who could vote in 1900? White men who were 21 or older. That's who could vote in 1900. Some men of color could also vote, but it depends on your region, right? But the voting eligible public, the highest proportion since 1900. Direct contact campaigns typically focus on the base rather than mobilizing new voters. You mobilize your base, you get them out. It's hard to get somebody to vote for the first time. It really is. A lot of the things, but understand this is important. The fact that we had big turnout in 2020, and we had big turnout because we did a lot of things to help people vote because there was a pandemic going on, right? But if people have voted once, they'll vote again. Okay? It's hard the first time, but once you've voted, it's easy to get you to go back out. They have to think about their return on the investment. Some people are mobilized at higher rates than others. Hey, how are college students mobilized? Highly? No. No. You guys are unlikely to vote. So why bother? Why bother? Those who participate are those who campaigns mobilize. Voting is skewed, remember, by income, education, age, work status, family structure, social networks. Remember, we talked about that? Who participates? How is voting skewed? That means if you're already likely to vote, if you're older, wealthier, more educated, then the campaigns are going to focus on you. We don't mobilize the youth. So, how does a campaign decide who it should target? We use big data, all those credit card purchases. You're more likely to vote Democratic if. You're more likely to vote Republican if. It's all public information. Read the fine print. Also, your web browsing information. Think about the way social media was weaponized during the 2016 and 2020 campaigns. Eric's going to talk a lot about that. How it was used to target. We construct complex statistical models, okay? Many years ago, I heard somebody speak, and he was an old-time political journalist. And he was like, the problem is these political scientists get in and they skew everything. They study all this stuff, and they get in there, the bottom of these campaigns, and they're the real problem. Because they target it. Right? And I was thinking, you need to read a little bit more. But we do have these models that will predict who you will vote for, whether or not you will vote, your position on certain key issues. My father, who was born in 1942, he died 5 years ago. He was my best friend. Devastating loss for me. He was what you call a yellow dog Democrat. What does that mean?
A liberal Democrat.
What does it mean, Eric?
It's a liberal Democrat who always votes Democrat.
He would vote for a yellow dog as long as it's a Democrat. Okay? It's a yellow dog Democrat. Okay? And if you look at the Democratic van, the voter information data on him, and I looked at it several years ago, about 6 years ago, and basically there's a list of things that you could contact him about and things that were off limits, and that's true for everybody, right? Don't talk about abortion, do talk about education, don't talk about unions, do talk about unions, all that sort of stuff. For him, you looked at the Democratic Party platform and it said, you can send him all of it. Right? It's a 99.9% chance he's going to vote for a Democrat. And so they sent him some stuff, made sure he got to the polls, all done. Right? My work is done here. But if I get somebody who says, hey, look, if you talk about education, that works, but don't talk to them about abortion, then they're not going to send me anything on that. Right? Who you will vote for, whether or not you will vote, and your position on certain key issues, we have it all. And by we, I mean the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. They have it all. And they target you. So there's also campaign finance rules which are important. Donations are donated directly from others to candidates. Those are limited, but self-funding is unlimited. You have to put in a lot for it to work. Trump put in $66 million of his own money. That worked. That got him the presidency. But John Corzine put in $62 million to get his Senate seat. That also worked. Forbes, Gary Romney, about $20 million. Not enough. Linda McMahon, $100 million she had spent on her own congressional campaigns, of her own money. She still has not managed to buy one. Non-candidate coordinating campaigning is unlimited, and the sources of funds are often hidden. Okay? The reporting requirements are really, really skewed. Citizens United versus FEC. It's a 5-4 decision. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled this in 2010, and here's the key. Back in Buckley versus Vallejo, 1976, the Supreme Court said, political speech is a right, you can spend your own money, right? Okay? You can spend your own money because political money spending, that's speech for an individual. But in Citizens United in 2010, they said corporations are people and have a right to free speech, and therefore can spend unlimited amounts of money on campaigns for people they support, not just running for office. This is a big, giant precedent that fundamentally alters the law. It overturns existing congressional legislation. It leads to the creation of super PACs to raise and spend money on behalf of candidates. Here are how elections have changed in terms of the money that's being spent. I have more recent graphs. There are even more. But you can see it's a steady growth. And this is real dollars. We've accounted for inflation here. So where's this? Here we have total raised by super PACs, 303 million, 41 spent by super PACs. Where'd the rest of that money go? Either into other campaigns in the future or into their pockets. That's how Sarah Palin lives. Okay? So, we have Stephen Colbert, and he's going to explain super PACs for you, and I have to do something tricky, I think.
Attendance.
To make this. Oh, attendance, please. While I'm fixing this, I'm going to take attendance.
It's live.
Okay, attendance is live.
As far as I can tell, the difference between a PAC and a super PAC is a cover letter. Because I formed a PAC, but a PAC can only take so much money and can only spend so much money. And I wanted to spend unlimited amounts of money and receive, more importantly, unlimited amounts of money. And so my lawyer told me all I had to do was add a cover letter that said, I intend this to be a super PAC. And it was a super PAC.
It all happened by accident. I just said, maybe, well, let's get